Welcome to the Art of Dress. Today I'm happy to share with you Ornament, which is to say ornamental design detail for Frida Gustavsson, Refined Classic, and Yasmeen Ghauri, Elaborate Classic. So thank you for coming and thank you for subscribing. Frida Gustavsson is a refined classic. And what I'd like to talk to you about today is how she uses ornament in order to bring herself into her style inspiration. So if you remember back to the style profiles, every single style has its own inspiration. And the inspiration is actually what brings a person into their style art, like their whole artistry of dress. In other words, you become a work of art. And so when we're looking at the design detail, we're actually understanding how do you make yourself feel so completely integrated that you actually feel like a work of art in your clothing. So here Frida Gustavsson is wearing a dress, and as you can see, it has a row of gathering that brings your eye right to her solar plexus. Her solar plexus is important to her because her inspiration is the moon. And what she tries to do in her clothing is she tries to bring the total focal point of every outfit is right at as if it were the full moon, like the shining light, right at the solar plexus. And then moving either up her body or down her body, she would have less and less happening, or less emphasis, or less ornament, because ornament is one of the most important ways to do this. Now, Yasmeen Ghauri is our second person, and she is going to show you, and what you can see here is that she has some of the same points as Frida Gustavsson. She also has to emphasize her waist, but also her focal point at her solar plexus. But her true style focal point is where her this little top, or kind of, it's sort of like a bustier, and it's ending at her true hip. In her case, her style focal point is her true hip, but her inspiration is to emphasize 5 points because she interprets the number 5. So the 5 points that she interprets are her true hip, then her waist, also her solar plexus, also at her throat, hopefully with a crossed halter perhaps, and then her shoes, which can be completely out of, you could say over the moon, they could say really expressed, really ornamented. She can do almost anything with her shoes to bring her into her number 5. So why do these two styles share this place on their bodies? In this case, could be the waist, but also the solar plexus. And in some cases, for Frida, it would also include her true hip. And that is because these two styles share the same planet. Their planet is Mercury. So this is a drawing, as you remember, this is the yin-yang wheel. And every style is on this according to their style focal point. And it stands to reason that when your style focal point is opposite each other on the wheel, as these two are, Frida is actually at the top on the right, and Yasmeen at the bottom on the left of this black line. So what's happening here is that on Frida's body, she has her solar plexus, and equidistant from her waist, moving down, would be her true hip. And the same thing with Yasmeen. Her focal point is the true hip, and if you move up, measure up to her waist, and then the same distance up on her body brings you to her solar plexus. So every style, usually these people that are opposite each other on the yin-yang wheel are not the same style. The refined classic and the elaborate classic are an exception. But every group, every pair has this relationship with their focal point. So it's like they have a shadow focal point. And sometimes they express it. In the case of Yasmine, she tries to all the time because it's part of her 5. But for most styles, they don't always express the shadow focal point, but it's there for them if they need it. And in this case, you'll see that sometimes Frida expresses her true hip shadow focal point, but not always. So let me show you some examples of how expressing these or bringing emphasis with design ornament, with ornamental design detail, I could call it, to these points on their bodies, how effective that is for making their outfits really come together in this artistic way. So first, let's look at Frida. And in this outfit, she has a few things of this outfit that are really suitable for her style, but definitely not everything. Okay, for example, it's not really her neckline. But if you notice the way that this ornament is done, she has a really strong marking right at her solar plexus with the way the top fringe ends and the second sort of big one begins. Right there is strong. It also shows her waistline with the way that the ornament curves around her body, and then it also shows her true hip where the skirt actually starts. And so even though there are many problems with this outfit for her, it still looks great. And that is because of achieving her inspiration through this dress. And in a similar way, a similar kind of outfit for Yasmine. And here you have in her case, she's also got at this point the crossed halter because she's got all that emphasis there. And then she has the solar plexus, the waist, as you see, where the designs are coming to kind of a stopping point and then starting up again at her true hip. And in her case, the dress is also bringing her into her inspiration of the number 5. We can only presume that her shoes are equally knockout, but at the same time, she is not wearing a dress that's really perfect for her, even though it's so stunning because it has way more ornament than she would normally wear. And it's a little bit fussy for her, right? Because the detail is her style doesn't really wear that much detail or even that much ornament. But because it's so perfectly situated, it's still really successful for her. And she's expressing the number 5. So let me show you a few more examples, and they're going to be in different ways. So this one is especially good at showing you how the ornament sort of gets bigger and stronger as she comes closer to the focal point here, and then it diminishes. Now in this case, this dress doesn't go any farther. She just has a skirt attached, and it's a little bit omega. The fabric is a little stiff, but the ornament is fantastic, and she is using her V neckline. But what is mostly successful about this is that also the kind of ornament is really suitable for her because it's not very big, but it is graduating in size and getting larger. And then it's a lot of embroidery, and also I think the little black things are shiny. So I think they're like those little metal things that you can work in, but they are small and they are used in, again, this sequence that totally brings her focal point into you could say importance or emphasis. Really, really cute for her. And then a similar outfit for Yasmine. Now in this case, she has one print on the bodice, and then the rest of the dress is made of this other kind of fabric that's ornamented, as you can see. But it also has those black dots that look, whether or not they were embroidered, they look like they could have been embroidered using a similar kind of ornament to Frida. And so here what you have is 3 sets of black dots. You can see them. One basically alluding to the solar plexus, another set like the waist, and then another set showing the hip. But right where the hip is, you can see that it's actually more than just 2. It actually expands into a complete horizontal row of dots around her true hip. So this is an interesting example of this usefulness of using this kind of a three-way thing that she does this over and over again. And although the 3 is not the 5, all 5 of her normal points, those 3 on her torso are really significant. And you will see that again and again, it really makes her dress or her outfit really, really successful for her. So this is an example of where a cutout is being used, because what ends up happening is either the cutout itself is ornamented, the shape of the cutout, or in this case, what ends up happening is because the fabric changed, then now you see she has like an overdress that's got all kinds of embroidery on it, and it shows up differently because of this cutout. And the cutout itself, this circular cutouts mark the solar plexus, the waist, and the hip. And then in a similar way, Yasmeen Ghauri is wearing the same idea. This time it's ornamented with sequins, which work great for her. And you can see the solar plexus, the waist, and the hip in exactly the same way. But it's really interesting how the 2 styles that are pairs like this, they often have things in common. So now Frida, in this case, is wearing chiffon. Chiffon is a great fabric for refined classic. First of all, it's very lightweight, and they wear amongst the lightest weight of all fabrics. And secondly, it has a balanced weave, which she needs anyway. But because of this balanced weave, it really lends itself to ornamentation, which is fantastic for her. The ornamentation can be used for 2 things, not just pure ornament and marking focal points and all of that, but also because it can bring in texture, as it does here. So she's killing all these birds with one stone, as you say. But this dress is interesting because if you look at these little horizontal rows of sequins, they're smaller at the top of the bodice, and get larger until you get to the solar plexus, and then they diminish again. So totally that idea of how sort of light, using ornament as light, is growing, reaches a peak, and then it starts to diminish. Amazing. And it has a few other things too. It shows the waist, it shows the hip, and then of course at the very top, it alludes to her V-neck line. So even though it's one shoulder, it has a lot of things that bring it into her style. So it's really successful for her. Plus, yellow is her style color. So amazing. So Yasmine has a dress that is also yellow, and it has a few things. It has a soft fabric, which she needs because of being composite, but that soft fabric is used in ways that around a structure, and the structure is successful for her especially because of the number 3. So you've got this medallion in the center that brings you to the solar plexus. You have the little metal clips plus the coming in at the waist that brings her into her second point. And then you have the repetition of the metal clips as well as the folds again on her true hip line for the 1, 2, 3. Now the refined classic. Here she's wearing a vest and skirt combination. It's a little unusual because what's happening here is it's a little bit hard to see all the detail. It's black on black. She has quite a bit. Really, it's a nice mix of plain fabric and ornament, which is really useful for her style because it gives you this kind of balance. But also the strongest part is actually this oval shape that ends up right at her solar plexus, and that's so interesting. And then it kind of alludes to the waist and also the hip where the vest ends. So she is showing all 3 of these points herself, but the main one for her is of course the solar plexus, and this dress works really well for that. And in a similar way, you have a vest combination for Yasmine. Now the ornament is the key point here because I just want you to notice right at the solar plexus, she has this outline of purple around some kind of black. I don't know what that is. It's some kind of shiny black, like onyx or rhinestones. I don't know. And there's green in there too. But anyway, that's the ornament that starts off at her solar plexus, and then she has it repeated at the waist. You can see it along the bands going down. The ornament is there. And then again, across the bottom, right where it's ending, you can see it starting to show up again. And of course, by ending at her hip, the vest all by itself is bringing attention there. So so she's doing the 1, 2, 3 again, and this time she's doing it, well, again, she's doing it with ornament, but this time it's shiny ornament, and it ends up to be really effective for her, really cute. So ornament once again is working here for Frida. Notice how the ornament forms this kind of a geometric shape, sort of a diamond, and then it sort of comes in like a, gosh, what would you call that? Comes into this sort of like a bullseye in the center of that diamond shape. And then, so bringing to the solar plexus, and then the diamond shape ends at her waist, and the top ends at her hip. So all three. Another couple of things here that are really cool in this case is, notice how soft the skirt is, and it just flows. And so even though it's a full skirt that opens out at below her hip, it doesn't show that how full it is completely. And that's appropriate, because despite the fact of being able to wear this omega line on the bottom for this kind of refined classic, she's not a very omega style. So the omega-ness is sort of diminished by the kind of fabric that she wears, as is appropriate. And the second thing is that she's wearing color combination that's what I would call coordinated. So this is really what this is her ideal, not separates, not where you have like a sharp contrast, because there's white in the vest as well, or the bodice. And it's also not monochromatic, but it's color coordinates. And that's something that, again, she shares with Yasmeen Ghauri. So really, really successful for her, but also in lots of ways. And then here we have another example. So this one, as you can see, is monochromatic. For Yasmeen, it would actually be even more successful if it were not that, but it's still really, really cute. And the ornament is doing the task here of bringing in the focal points. Because it's underneath the bust line, she's got this semicircle right at the focal point, the solar plexus, highlighting the waist, and again highlighting with the pockets, and again that circular cut, highlighting her true style focal point of the true hip. And once again, just how successful the corsets are, because they allow the throat to be referenced without even always necessarily marking it. So this one is just another example of how the lining behind can make the lace more impactful as you go down. It's not that you see the lace more, it's what you see is you have a stronger statement because it's dark. And so here she has the lace that's right at her solar plexus, really being the featured full expression of the lace and bringing her that focal point. And she has again her V neckline, really nice, as well as her waist and hip. And notice that the fact that she has a collar here is almost insignificant, and that's because it doesn't do anything for her style to wear a collar. If in fact it were highlighted more, it would kind of detract from her style, because with her V, she's showing emphasis out, strengthening her silhouette with the V neckline. And so that's really what just bring herself into that kind of, it's an earth style aspect. But the ornament is very successful in showing the most important for her, which is the solar plexus, the full light of ornament coming right to the center of her body there. And Yasmeen is also wearing one of my favorite examples of ornament for the elaborate classic. So she has a couple of things happening here. She has a very fitted top that all by itself really gives her a chance to show the form, the waist, the hip, and the solar plexus. So that's there. But she's accentuating it with ornament, and part of that is all this little shirring or pleating. Very successful to bring that attention there. but also the lace. And the lace is not only larger in scale, it is also re-embroidered, which makes it stronger because it makes it heavier. And so it's like so magnificent. And then she has a really large piece of that lace in the most important 3 points, the solar plexus, the waist, and then all around the hip to really bring in the strongest focus at her style focal point. And then in addition to that, she has just a little bit of, she has a little bit of lace going down her sleeves. So her balance of detail and how, and also the scale of her detail is all very appropriate for her style, which of course I love that. And then she is wearing a collar, and the collar is really important for her because it brings back this, the same kind of emphasis that you get from the cross halter, bringing it right to her neckline. So really, really beautiful, elegant evening dress for Yasmine, and very successful. So I'd like to recap all of the things that you have in common with when you're in the same planet of style. So we've spent this whole time talking about ornament, and so it's not just the kind of ornament, it's also often the placement of ornament. It may not be 100% the same, but there's always overlap because everyone has this shadow focal point, the shadow focal point to their style, which is the main focal point for the other person in their that shares their planet. And then we talked briefly about that color scheme that you use. That's something you share because you're in the same planet. And then before we talked about mood of style and how important that is, and you share that with your planet pair or mate. And then you also have the line of your sleeve, the line of your pant leg, and the line of your overall silhouette. And then finally, you have the opposite. You have the opposite silhouette. So one of you is always going to be omega and the other alpha, but you're the same expression of that silhouette. So if one of you is very alpha, the other of you is going to be very omega, or not very alpha, just slightly alpha and slightly omega. So this pair that we've spent today talking about come under the category of somewhat alpha, not the most, and somewhat omega. So in the sort of not very category. So one more dress for each one of them, or outfit. And in the case of Frida here, the refined classic, I love how the ornament starts out small, and as you move down the V line into her solar plexus, it gets stronger, larger, more pronounced, just amazing for her, and then begins to diminish. So it really highlights the solar plexus as using ornament in the idea of light, the sort of source of light for her entire outfit, and makes her style, brings it into the kind of work of art category, which means that it feels really integrated for her, really comfortable for her. And then you have the same exact idea for Yasmine. In her case, the corset, which as always, very strong at the hip. Usually the motif is the strongest there, and that's her true style focal point, but also marking the waist, marking the solar plexus, and often bringing some kind of focus up to the throat, so she's getting that as well. And then of course it's always up to her to finish with this knockout shoe. So thank you for sharing this with me today, and I look forward to the next one. There's only 2 left. Next week we're going to look at Jupiter, and I'd like to thank you again for coming and for subscribing and giving me the chance to show you all the things I've been working on for so long. And I look forward to seeing you again next week, and in the meantime, please take care.